The agenda.
And joining us now on the debate, in New York, New York, Gregory Snyder, professor of sociology and anthropology at Baruch College and the author of Graffiti Lives. And here in Toronto, Hal Niedzviecki, author of Hello, I'm Special. Elizabeth Bromstein, columnist for Now Magazine and Simpatico MSN. And Daniel Silver, associate professor of sociology at the University of Toronto.
It's my pleasure.
I want to start with you, Hal, because you used to do a radio show on CBC about subcultures. We just referred to one subculture, I guess, the Montreal Canadiens. Now we're going to talk about a bunch of other ones. You want to give us your best definition, just to get us started here, of what a subculture is?
Sure, yeah, and it's interesting because you think, okay, well, a sports team, rabid fans, that's not a subculture. It is the culture. You know, we live that. Subculture is in opposition to the mainstream culture. A subculture is something that challenges the mainstream culture a bit. And so the people in the subculture, they're a lifestyle, they're a group, and the fact that they're in opposition to the mainstream sort of reaffirms and tightens the bonds that keep them all together.
Well,
so
if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan in Toronto, would that be a subculture?
It could be, but you know, you'd be so lonely, and,
well, that's
and
the
then
point.
You'd move back.
Okay.
But there's this whole kind of it's influenced, it's inspired by pop culture, but at the same time it's against the prevailing norms.
Gotcha. Okay, Gregory, to you in New York, you started doing a PhD on graffiti artists, and you kind of got sucked into that subculture bit. Can you describe how that happened for you?
Well, it happened pretty organically, actually. It was the fall of 1995, and I was riding my bike over one of the bridges from Brooklyn to Manhattan, and I basically stumbled across a graffiti mural, and it was big and impressive and powerful. And I basically rode my bike into my advisor's office and said, look, I don't want to study embodied Christianity in Haitian churches anymore. I want to study graffiti writing. It wasn't really a tough choice, but that's how I got started.
And did you, from the beginning, see it as something insurgent? It has to have that aspect to it, I guess, as Hal says.
You know, it's something that I originally approached with a certain level of insurgence. Lots of definitions of subculture have this sort of resistant quality to it. But actually what I found is there's sort of a diversity of resistances throughout the subculture. There are some people are sort of rabidly subversive, while others are sort of quiet conformists and are looking to just sort of participate in the culture and finds a sense of community. So I actually find a diversity of definitions for the resistance within a subculture.
Okay, we'll follow up on some of those themes through the course of our discussion. This whole week we're doing programming on belonging, on what it is like to belong and to feel an identity and the importance of that kind of identity. I think people can understand why you'd want to identify with the prevailing culture of the day. But what is the attraction to being in the anti-culture of the day, if you like, the subculture?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of attractions. The first thing you have to always remember is so much of this comes out of pop culture, and pop culture is all about the anti-hero. It's all about, you know, the underside, and in pop culture, in fact, the prevailing culture is usually evil and bad. So there's big business is crushing you, stealing your health care, whatever. You know, the government is lying to you and cheating, and you know, it's you against the world. So subcultures they take some of those themes and they bring them into their subcultural doings, you know, to be abstract about it. But you know, something like graffiti art or a body modification subculture. There's this whole idea of, you know, we don't like what we see out there in the prevailing culture, so we're going to band together and we're going to act and do these things that are in opposition to this culture. So it's very gratifying because, you know, if you want to create an identity for yourself and a community and a group for yourself, well, what better way is there than to say, you know, I'm against all these people and I stand alone with my small group of you know, merry rebels. That's a part of it.
But Hal, do you see that as, you know, losers make up most of the subculture? I know that they certainly don't see it that way, but if you're not a member of the prevailing culture, are you know, is that pejorative look at you the way they see it?
Well, I mean, you know, every subculture is different. There are subcultures that I've had experience with where they really flaunt their opposition to the mainstream. For instance, the body-modifying cultures.
What does that mean?
That's people who are really, really identified with tattoos, branding, scarification, piercings in unusual places, to the points of amputation. I met people who, you know, were considering amputations of their body parts.
Hang on. Because they wanted to fit into some kind of body amputation subculture?
Basically, yes, essentially.
And the attraction to this would be what exactly?
Well, the attraction is once you get into one of these tight-knit groups, there's a push to do more and to go further. And the further you go, and in this case, you can measure your progress very clearly. And I think, maybe it might be the same with the graffiti culture, where it's like, if you just do a little thing on a trash can, big deal. You need to go further to be truly accepted into this culture. And people go further and further, and they do lose sight of the way other people could see them because they're so immersed in their culture, which, so it's not a question necessarily of, oh, these are losers, but they're people who didn't fit in, who felt that they wanted a community, who would accept them, who could embrace them as people. Oh, here are some people who don't care, that I'm a little off. To the point of this whole idea of kind of the fantasy and the nerds taking over. There's some subcultures that actively pursue their oppositional stance. So, for instance, body mods. If you can get to the point where you're doing something illegal, like performing illegal amputation on somebody, that's really a sign that you've gone far into this subculture. Other subcultures, for instance, like the furry subculture, which is a subculture where people dress up and adults dress up and pretend to be anthropomorphic animals. They actively seek the love of the mainstream, and
can we run this clip now, Michael? Can we do this clip now? We happen to have the furries on tape here.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good. I
Shall we?
Them up, by all means.
Roll tape, please.
When you have a young mind, you have imagination.
We never really grew out of the idea of animal people.
Children are allowed to use it.
When I was a kid, I was a mad scientist. I didn't have any friends, so I went home and made some. Mom always said to make friends.
I went to school as the odd person, as the person with no
Yes,
friends.
yes.
And I had to pretend to be, into the race cars.
If I wasn't in the suit, I'd be considerably more shy. But when I put on the suit, I feel excited. I mean, it's a transformation. It's a rush. There's a high to it that can't be beat.
I guess adults shouldn't play like that. They should do their accounting and they should go to work and drive their cars and drink their coffee. But it's like, why? It's no fun.
What's going on there?
There's the furries.
What's going
as
on
I was
there?
saying, they are begging us to love them. That's what's. When I did a whole episode of this CBC radio show on the furries, and it was quite fascinating because they really were. They were the nerds. They were the losers. They were the Dungeons and Dragons obsessives who never grew out of it.
Hal, did you ever do this?
I tried it during the radio show. I put on some wings and a nice dragon face and wiggled my tail and stuff. And one of the things that you'll hear over and over, and you heard on this, is that when you put on the costume, you are shy, you are awkward, you dislike yourself. You put on that costume and you go to a convention, all of a sudden you are dancing on the stage. You are saying, look at me, I'm Rabbit. Pay attention to me, I am free. And I think that's a big part of subcultures as well. It's a role play, and so you're not you're somebody who you'd like to be, and that's very liberating.
Daniel, 30 years ago, if you wanted this, you had to seek it out. You had to know people, you had to know where to find it. Yeah. Today, you go to Google, it's there in an instant. How has the internet changed subculture?
Well, what there is a deepening. So there's no going home, there's no getting away from it. You're always living it. You can always go to the chat room, you can always, the furries, for instance, I talked to a guy who primarily wrote otter furry erotica. That was his thing. You don't want to ask about that.